Welcome back. Let's continue with our discussion of the dangers of Kotlin. We just discussed operator overloading and extension functions. Now the time is for the next item in the Bart's personal list, lambdas with receivers.
Right. So lambdas with receivers is one of these fun things that gives you all kind of power.
Yeah, so that's another very powerful tool to add a syntax sugar. Because to me, I would just say it's just a builders on steroids. Whatever you can do with lambdas with receiver, you could have done with builders or just direct calls to objects. It just makes the invocation side a little bit neater, a little bit cleaner, if you don't lose the context, of course. If you do it carefully.
Exactly, because that's what like the biggest risk is. That
depends again how many different things you mix up. I found your example weaker on the weaker side because it was not really about the danger and focusing on the danger and complications that are coming with the lambdas and the receivers. There were just multiple things combined together, and that's why it was a little bit difficult to trace, okay, whether it's it or this, or where this come from, and so on. I should say that I really like lambdas with receiver and I use them a lot, but my main use is for test data. So whenever I have test data to be prepared, when the simple function with defaults and parameter names is not enough, and that's mostly when you have a little bit more complicated logic when preparing your data, or you have nested objects. Well, in Java, the solution would have been just a builders, and basically you do a builder, but it's so much easier and nicer to read than the builders with the lambdas, with DSLs that basically you build. So instead of saying given order dot with dot with dot with this, and especially then in nested you have with and with lines, and then you start to build the lines in the same with the maze of the braces. You have nice and clean curly braces, say order, curly brace, line, curly brace, and so on. So I believe that improves the readability strongly. That's why I'm using it a lot.
Why do you need the context of the order to create the lines?
I don't need the context of the order. I need the context of the order builder. That's why I'm using. So it's a builder. It's a test object builder. So in Java, how you would do this without the lambdas with receiver? Either you just create the full order yourself, but when it's complicated, it's not very convenient. So you will be having some helper builder objects, basically. And the lambda with receiver allow you to just use it much more conveniently in Kotlin test code. Instead of with, and keeping these chains, you have much more visual, much more cleaner representation with the structure.
Because the advantage there indeed is that the context of the builder is implicit, essentially.
Yes, so in this case, because you know that you are building it within a setup of your test, for example, you know what is the context. You know that you explicitly say it's order. It's not something...
So it's basically sort of like named parameters on steroids then.
It's builders on steroids. That's when name parameter is not enough. And I would always say, okay, as long as you can go with just simple helper functions and the name parameters, and you can go very far with them, just stick with them. But at some point it becomes
values and stuff like that.
That's awesome. But at some point it can become complicated. In my experience, mostly when you have either nested structures, or if you have some, if you would like to have some convenience shortcuts. It's very useful, can be very useful. I can understand where it can be dangerous.
Yeah, because default, when you see a lambda, you expect it to be a closure. So you expect the scope to be the same as the scope that surrounds it. But that whole concept is different for a lambda.
But unfortunately, I'm afraid that in Kotlin you have to get used to that. You need to always double check what's the scope, what is it, what is this.
Yeah. So perhaps it might be even easier to switch from JavaScript to Kotlin than it would be to switch from Java to Kotlin.
I think you will have a little bit less hard time indeed, because exactly this particular feature what we're talking about, the lambdas with receiver, it's very similar to what you would have in JavaScript, with just functions that you reattach to this that you defined, and then it would be almost like natural. But if you're just coming from pure Java experience, yes, that can be quite confusing again, because the structures in your mind you have built and prepared how this works, how this, meaning what is this, how what to expect when you see certain types of the code patterns, and that will not work anymore, unfortunately. Okay.
Yeah, and that basically also harkens the primary purpose of the talk, because the specific features actually don't really matter so much as the message of the talk, which is apply things with caution. It's
Yes, think about the downside of this, and with that can be a good bridge to more dangerous sides of Kotlin, which we can discuss.
It seems it's almost like we planned this out.
Yes, absolutely. So
from our earlier discussion, the fourth thing that I wanted to put in there was actually infix functions, because I think this is also one of those things that can be useful, but can also work really badly, especially because it has this effect of making it harder to figure out what a function is or not.
I'm curious, actually, how much problems do you have?
I think this was around the time when Scala was really popular as well. At this time, it was like, oh yeah, you can make DSLs really easily with this tool. And then there was this wave where everyone tried to turn everything into DSLs, and then infix functions give you the possibility to make essentially bare words program be syntactically correct. The problem I have with that kind of code, it rarely holds up to real world use cases. You can design it in such a way that you could theoretically spell out real sentences that are valid code, but then as soon as you need something else, then you're gonna need to add brackets anyway, and then it just makes reading the code harder instead of easier to read, which I guess is the purpose of using the infix function. So
that's potentially dangerous things that we know from the previous experiences, but again, when applied moderately, it can be useful, and so far you haven't suffered that much, so it's a little bit more on the potential side. Don't abuse, be careful about this one. Okay, I have one of the biggest dangerous side of Kotlin for me is this perception that if something possible to do it differently in Kotlin, we should always do it the Kotlin way. Throw everything that we used to do in Java and try to do it in a different way. Try to use more idiomatic libraries. Try to avoid variables. I heard, well, in the extreme examples, I had teams and people who were just saying we should not use any variables because with Kotlin we don't have to. We should always use let, apply, and change those things altogether in the nice long things.
Yeah, being too idiomatic about how you use Kotlin. I mean, I do see the value in trying to stay true to a language in order to make a language work maximally for you. It makes sense to work with the language instead of against the language. But being dogmatic about this is a huge risk.
Yes, it's it can be a problem with team dynamics, because you're starting to get into unnecessary complication between people who, depending on the interpretation of what Kotlin, more and less Kotlin idiomatic, and you can be wasting a little bit of time there and effort. So I think it's better to go gradually into Kotlin
and that also harkens back to that thing you said somewhere in March about that you don't like consistency in codebase, and that what you meant was that you don't like consistency as a purpose, as a goal in itself. And I think this is exactly that.
Yes, you want to apply it when it's applicable, when it brings value. And maybe what you were saying is that sometimes you want to push a little bit. Yes, okay, if we got used to work in Java, of course you want to start using a little bit of more Kotlin goodness. But it's usually better to go in not to go full heads on and just rewrite everything and change everything, because many of those things, they were in Kotlin, they were designed to solve particular problems in particular cases.
Exactly.
The fact that you can do apply doesn't mean that you have always to do apply and avoid all the variables, because you just making it actually less readable. Maybe It just, in some cases, it's very, very convenient to have this, and that's where it was added. Another potentially dangerous side in this case is seeing Kotlin as functional programming language, chasing the goal of writing functional style, purely functional. A little bit of functional is good, but purely functional.
Yeah.
And here the big suspect is introduction of arrow K in your project. And okay, I don't want necessarily to say that this is a bad idea. You can do functional programming with Kotlin, and you can probably do quite close to a pure functional if you want to. The main message, I would say, that's not a decision that you should take lightly. It's not something that, okay, let's add some error and see how it goes. You need to agree it with the team. That should be a cautious decision, and it's not by default a better way. It's a different way, and there are many downsides of going pure functional programming. There are powers, but also downside.
Similar to idiomatic as an objective, like paradigm as an objective doesn't add value. You need a clear case to why this paradigm would work better in this particular case, and then you can apply it.
I think that's a little bit more complicated because, okay, maybe we are going a little bit too far, and we should have at some point a small episode on functional style versus non-functional styles.
Yes, that would be a really interesting one.
But to sum up my point, Kotlin is not pure functional language. Arrow key adds a very different type of the programming to Kotlin. Be aware of that, and you and your team should be fully on board, move in that direction. It's not something that you can just add. It's like adding a little bit Scala to your code base. If you're adding Scala, then you should add Scala, and everybody should be on board with that. Same with arrow key or full functional programming with Kotlin. Then I think that's it for now. So these are the dangers we've seen so far and experienced, mostly.
Yeah.
We'll see whether we discover something else, and then we can record a little bit more.
Right, yeah. So if you have any other features, dangerous features that we've missed, or maybe particularly dangerous features about different programming languages, or particularly good things about Kotlin, let us know, because we'd love to take it on board, evolve our opinions, and discuss it with you.